Good afternoon, LinkedIn Live, and we are live from Hartford, Connecticut, the capital of insurance. And with me today, I'm Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean Audit, the host of OK Boomer TV, and I just can't get enough of my guest to introduce him before I do. Kevin Hill, welcome from FreightWaves and Carrier Lists. Kevin, what an honor to have you on the show today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on here, Steve. I love OK Boomer. It's a great show, great concept. You're doing a fantastic job and learning how to produce it all yourself, which is challenging, I know. But thanks again for having me on.
Well, running it from the catbird seat, it's a challenge, and it's one of the things that I found, quite frankly, I don't tell many people the story, but I studied improvisational acting, and I heard you're pretty good at it. So I know this is unscheduled, and I don't want the audience to have any false notions. We rehearsed this, but you mind if I do a little improv with you to kick the show off?
Yeah, let's do that. And this is not rehearsed whatsoever. This is a complete and utter surprise.
Well, actually, this has a lot to do with the show, and it has a lot to do with the fact that and I sit here in the crow's nest here in Hartford in my studio, and I'm out there Zooming and I'm teaming. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today actually has to do with Zoom and team and being more functional. But the improv is something that audience, I have caught Kevin off guard here, and he is really a good sport. And I may blow it, but here goes. So Kevin, here we go. Let's just pretend that you and I are having a Zoom conversation, okay? So we start off, you've got your background on, I've got my background on, and you're an importer or exporter that I would like to, do an ocean audit for. And so my first thing I would talk about, hey, Kevin, thank you so much for joining me on the call today.
Well, thank you, Steve. I'm really interested to see how you can help our organization.
Well, yeah, let me tell you something. I got a little intimidated looking at your background. I heard that you were intelligence, and I wanted to know, how long were you with the CIA?
I was with the CIA. Well, I can't really tell you the entire time, little bits and pieces. So what I can tell you about is about 18 months of a very long-term career in it.
Well, somebody that has served our country like you have and has the wealth and knowledge of intelligence that you have, you probably already know the direction I'm going to go in my pitch. So why don't we just cut to the chase? And would you agree to the contract at 48%?
Let's do 48% if you can save me $5 million.
Listen, I'll tell you, this is really funny about the whole thing. So I thought you were going to say that I wasn't with the CIA. And then I was going to say, well, I read that you were intelligence. And then I said, oh, I must have read that you were in intelligence in Wall Street. So let me reset this whole thing. And I set you up in a way that you didn't quite take my bait. Yeah. But listen, so here's my audience. This is Kevin Hill. And Kevin is from University of Oklahoma. Kevin has worked in Wall Street in intelligence, in business intelligence. And that's what really got me. That's when I thought I could do a little play on word and make you comfortable. So I seem to have done that. Kevin has developed Carrier Lists, which I want to get into a little bit about what he's done for his business practice. And of course, you all know him out there in LinkedIn land as the preeminent host of FreightWaves, one of the co-hosts. And he does have to put up with Tim Duna. But anyway, Kevin, welcome again to the show.
Thank you very much, Steve. It's great to be here.
And I truly was impressed. I had actually looked at an old bio that you had done in logistics interview with Joe, and I was really impressed with the fact that you combine Wall Street and business intelligence in one sentence in terms of your bio. That's pretty darn impressive. How did you get to Wall Street?
So I moved to New York about 2004, and it was just a kind of a spur of the moment thing. And I worked in sales here and there in New York, and finally got into the financial field. It was a company called Merger Market, and they did mergers and acquisitions, intelligence for investment banks, law firms, advisories, acquisitive companies. And it was just a new way of piping out kind of qualitative information. And it was back in the heyday, right before the bubble burst, and the world fell apart during the financial recession. So I think they were just happy to get anyone to come in to do sales at that point. The job market was really hot. But I learned a lot from that and was able to get into freight and transferred a lot of what I learned about gathering intelligence and kind of word of mouth and qualitative information into the trucking industry.
Well, you've made quite a name for yourself in the trucking industry, and as a pivot to the fact of being in sales, do you attribute being in sales? We talked a little bit offline before about you're getting into TV. Do you equate the one and two of the same? I mean, can you look at your background in sales and say that helped you prepare for a career in television?
Yes, I mean it certainly does, and you know this as well. You're on TV or video or podcasts or even writing. You're always selling something, right? We're all selling something. We're selling our ideas. You're selling people on
Right, right,
time,
right, right.
right? Money, all of those things, and it works really well in TV because you're always you're kind of pitching all three of those, and then you have sponsors, right? And you're doing a great job for the sponsors, making sure that their target audience is engaged. So you're always selling.
And I think you hit the nail on something that's really interesting. And one of the things I hate, and we did the segment together recently on pitch decks. And I wish that word was not. It's kind of one of those hokey words, pitch decks, right? Like, what are you pitching? And I think that in this day and age, I also don't like the word necessarily, he's a storyteller. I see that all the time, he or she is a storyteller. And I don't quite know what that means other than what I read to my kids, Dick and Jane. But tell me about a little bit between the gaps in terms of like, I like to say that what I think one of the things that my clients like about, the way I position myself, and I think you're a lot like the way I think, is that you position yourself as an expert. You give away some sharing elements or some sharing points that people can use immediately. And I don't think that's selling, right? I think that's telling, but at the same time, it's converting. What's your take on that?
Well, it is definitely converting. I mean, content marketing is huge, and we're both entrepreneurs. We both are somewhat solo. I think you're still a solopreneur.
I am.
And I'm a solopreneur. I have people that work for me, but they're more 1099, very flexible. I'm the one who kind of manages and owns that operation and the success and failure of that. And whenever it's your own product, your own service, you have a much more intimate type of relationships with it. It's like a child in a lot of ways. And you have to make sure you nurture that and you play the long game. It has to be a sustainable business and you're in control of that process. So it makes it really much easier and much more flowing. And
Sure.
for me to create Carrier List and for you to create Ocean Audit, we have to be experts at compiling that data, sharing that data. So we by default become experts in a way that you can't in a sales role, like a sales rep role.
I think about it a lot, and it's really weird, right? Like I had a call yesterday with a large consumer goods company, and the VP of operations was such a terrific Zoom, with him, and he introduces his team. And the team member is a very intelligent person, but new in logistics, right? And after I had done my thing, and I limit my little talk to maybe 10, 11 minutes, and I tell anecdotes, I talk about their Zoom backgrounds, and I have my own kind of homesy, folksy way to tell it. But at the end of the 12 minutes, the person on the receiving end said, hey, I learned so much about the industry in 12 minutes that, in 12 months, I didn't know on this side of the things. And I think that, I'm a real big believer in that book, The Outlier, where you have the 10,000 hour of expertise. I mean, how long did it take you to develop Carrier List?
It took me, I thought of the idea and kind of incorporated and got an LLC in September of 2015 because I thought that was the most important thing for a business, right? And it turns out that it's not really that important as a first step, right? You have to be able to develop that product and get a customer before you even need to worry about forming an LLC or incorporation or really even thinking about a lot of that. But yeah, September of 2015, I didn't make my first sell until I didn't really have a product, even when I made my first sell. I had a sample in June of 2016. So it was about 7 or 8 months. I was working full time while I was doing this as well. And to get from an idea or a concept to an actual product and go through the FMCSA census file, which is this huge database that not really made for what people would like to try to use it for. It took a lot of trial and error.
What was your? It's just like two guys talking here. I love talking to you so much. What was your your aha moment when you knew you were going to make it and then that was going to be successful? What was the aha moment? The one moment? I'll tell you mine in a second, but what's yours?
I think I struggled through 2016. I left my job at the end of 2016. I struggled through 2017 for the most part until the economy started picking up, and it's feeling like the same thing is happening right now with supply and demand and trucking. But people, the press, I was doing content marketing, I was doing research, I was doing a lot of weekly ELD compliance because we're running into the mandate. And I started getting a lot of eyeballs just from that. And I was just doing that for free. And I was really marketing it, and sales started picking up, and I started getting a flywheel, right? I started noticing that this is the key to having that flywheel. I was just starting that flywheel, but I really doubled down and focused on a long-term solution of creating that flywheel, that a positive feedback loop, and this formula. And at that point, I was like, well, this formula is going to work in some respect, whether it's for carrier list, whether it's for another business, it doesn't matter, but this is the way to go.
Right. And, when you did that, right, what part of it, what part zoned you out? Like, well, let me explain for a second. So when I had that, when I first knew I was onto something, I was in Bellevue, Washington, and I had a small Japanese importer agree to let me look at their records. And I found like a $300 refund, right? And I said to myself, wow, 50% of 300 is 150. And, it took me a few weeks to convert the refunds, and it was more than 300, but I actually found one invoice for what was overcharged. And I thought to myself, this is the start of something big. Mm-hmm. And I told my mentor at the time about what I had found. And he said, it's just an outlier. You'll never be successful in this. And, lo and behold, then, years later, someone even like Maersk Line's CEO goes and says, hey, the industry's in shambles with regards to invoicing inaccuracy. So that was kind of my aha moment, finding that small refund. And it meant so much to me, even though there is millions to be had in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and to go along that point, my real aha moment in that respect was my first sell. I only had a sample product out there.
Oh, wow.
I was trying to online market, and it was like 1,200 carriers. It was hardly anything. Only one person bought on that pre-sale, but it was a top 5 freight broker.
Wow.
Like top 5. And I was like, well, okay, I'm on to something. I was thinking the small guys could use this, and they certainly can. But even the biggest of the big guys are looking for this data.
Kevin, what you just said gives me goosebumps because this is unplanned as well. I didn't even plan to, incorporate this, but, there's a lot of people out there that use this hashtag open to work. You've seen it, right? On LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're men and women with such strong creds and backgrounds, and they have so much to contribute. And so a lot of times, some will ask me, about how to get started, as a solopreneur or as an entrepreneur. And I've given a few talks like the New York Public Library small business series. And so one of the suggestions I give a lot is I'll tell somebody out of work that's a specialist in whatever the field that they're in, go to a company and, basically you don't spend an inordinate amount of time on it, but do something pro bono, right? Do it so that whoever it is, that CEO, CFO, or business owner says, wow, I appreciate your guidance. Now they might not be able to pay you, right? And in the case of this Japanese importer, it wasn't the fact that he paid me, X. It's the fact that I got to use him as a reference, right? Yeah. I'm sure that was what was, important for you too when you landed that top 5 broker, right? Exactly
right. Credibility. It's huge. And going off your point is if you start a business, you're going to be working pro bono no matter
Exactly.
what.
Exactly.
So it doesn't really matter.
So why not do it that way? Why not
Exactly.
go out, why not go out to, I don't know, I'm just picking, Omaha, Nebraska, and go to a large importer there that's furloughed all his staff and say, hey, I can help you do a better X, and I'll do it for free. And if you do it and you execute it and, you've got to, he may even say, let me pay you. Or he may say, what can I do for you? Because I don't have the funds. Well, how about a reference?
Exactly right. That's all it really takes. And you're kind of proving your concept and seeing if you're, if your model,
it's like your own business laboratory, right?
Yeah. And whether you're charging or giving it free, you're not going to make anything, right? For the most part, it's going to go out the door to somebody else to build, to expand, maybe, other things. But as an entrepreneur, you're not going to get paid. You're not going to pay yourself for a long time.
But at this point, it doesn't matter. It's just the fact that, you go ahead and you do something for, I'm just making up a name, I don't know, General Dynamics, or if you do something special for Boeing, and then you tell a new prospect, you don't even need a reference. You can just say, oh, I went to Boeing and I showed them a new way to do that, right? I mean, you just say that. That's the truth. You're not lying, right?
Yeah.
You did it, right?
It is.
And I just think I mean, it's those fine tuning, it's like, as a boomer, right? I remember the AM FM dial where, you had to just dial that right, to hear the right, ball game, right? And it's like 95.7 is not good enough, but 95.68 is the right sweet spot. And I think that's what a lot of us need in business. But I'll tell you, the other question I asked you, and I asked you prematurely, is, what kind of zones you out about the carrier list business? Like, for example, in ocean audit, and I had this conversation with a top influencer recently, believe it or not, one of the things that is the least fun for me to do, should I say this, is invoice my clients. I mean, I love everything up to the invoicing. And then when I have to prepare the invoice, it's like, I get writer's cramp. Because I don't like that kind of stuff. But do you see my question? What about you?
Yeah, I do say that question. I still have, whenever I send out an invoice, I have writer's block. I kind of delay it for whatever reason. It doesn't really make sense. But either there's some editing that I have to do to make sure that the information that we get on our phone calls is in a format that's transferable or that looks the same on no matter what carrier you open up. You get the same kind of template, same kind of information. It's just not like disparate data that the user has pieced together. But it's the mundane part of carrier lists.
I love it, and we're having so much great free-form question, and I want to actually delve into some of the constructive topics. And if we have time, I'd like to get back onto some of these great things because you're such a wealth of information, and I really love the topic. And by the way, if you're just joining us, you're joining Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean Audit, and Kevin Hill, FreightWaves and television host and owner of Carrier List on this edition of OK Boomer Live. And we want to thank all the listeners that are joining us, and a special shout out to CNN and Fox News for the invites or them coming in today. So, Kevin, I see this a lot in high finance, and I'm sure you've seen it on Wall Street, and it's a trend that I believe to give our LinkedIn listeners and viewers something to think about. And we talked about entrepreneurship, and what I'm about to delve into now is something along the lines of being a fractional shipping manager, a fractional logistics manager, a fractional contributor to multiple companies. I like the idea a lot about the fact that, at least in the ocean world, and perhaps it's similar in truck world, maybe even more so, but I know tons and tons, maybe there's 20,000 importers and exporters that have staffing levels of less than, say, 40 total employees or 25 total employees. There's a heck of a lot out there. A lot of them have been devastated by the economy with the COVID crisis. And some people have moved on from careers, and you have business owners just scratching their heads about the incredible cost overruns, both in trucking, domestic, parcel, air, ocean. So I believe there's this incredible window of opportunity now for our LinkedIn friends and networks to go to Omaha, go to Akron, go to Austin, go to Phoenix, not go there, but pitch a way to fractionally help these companies. And this is a new way for them to create their own business and to basically achieve multiple streams of revenue and to kind of get that win-win reference point that we talked about before in the hypothetical example. So let's talk a little bit about, fractional leadership or being a fractional type entrepreneur. And can you give me your take on how something like this might apply in the trucking world or the carrier world that you come on from your side?
Yeah, so a 3PL, like a freight brokerage, is kind of that outsource. You're kind of a fractional help on that. And most freight brokers, if you have 5 or 6, 7, up to 10 really good customers who can really drive business for you, you're basically their outsourced transportation partner. I won't say their department, but their partner, and that kind of goes into managed trans as well. But that's all you really need to build a really nice book of business. And it takes a long time of course, to win the trust and that relationship. But it's kind of how freight brokerage, and especially if you're an agent or a salesperson on the floor, and that's how you're kind of operating. That those 5 clients are going to generate 80% of the margin that you get a commission off of, and then you're going to have others that you're going to be developing all the time to come in and replenish or to grow your book.
But do you see an opportunity like that? I mean, to be you're basically it's like ocean, right? I mean, I always tell people that in ocean, there are several key events in container history, right? The invention of the container ship, the build of say 20, 40, 45-foot containers, intermodal rail, better port handling. Right. I mean, the list is fairly short in terms of what innovations there are, right, in our industry. I think you would agree. I mean, other than, more Star Wars stuff like J.B. Hunt's, 360 and a lot of the innovation in tracking and tracing and probably booking that goes into your side of the equation. It's still a people business. Agree or disagree?
Oh, definitely agree. It's all a people relationship business.
And so to take that one step further, right, I guess the one thing that troubles me a little bit is that I don't see the velocity of people wanting to do this that are stepping up to the plate, at least in my little world, right, that I see in Ocean. But I mean, what I'm saying is that you look at LinkedIn postings, right? And I think I'm really up to speed on who's doing what. I know I have one good friend that's really engaged in doing that. He's in kind of that freight brokerage type industry. But a lot of them don't, right? A lot of them, I think, are sitting in St. Louis and in Omaha thinking, I want to do this, but, how can I get better at it? And so I started thinking about, a corollary type idea, and that's using like Zoom panels, where, professionals like yourself and myself or whatever industry, and again, we always mention that pro bono stuff, and I'm always big on giving back to the community, but I like the idea of establishing some Zoom panels on entrepreneurship within, say, the carrier, freight brokerage, ocean space. What do you think of that idea?
I think that it's a wonderful idea. I think this is the time to really capitalize on it. Video is now a normal, everyday type of communication for all of us because of Zoom meetings or Teams meetings or Google Meet meetings. I think everyone is much more comfortable with video. There's not that emphasis on travel anymore, that you have to go meet face to face, and business can't happen without doing that. I think this is, like a lot of other trends over the last 4 or 5 months. This has really accelerated this trend, and it's like doing a webinar or a mini webinar in a way, but having a panel discussion. I mean, it's great networking. It's great building up your networking, but filling your pipeline. Right.
Well, I just think that I think one of the things like right now is I remember when I was speaking in the New York Library Symposium, there were people from all walks of life. There were people that were in the 70s, retired, that wanted to start a home-based business. I was talking about entrepreneurship in general. There were truck drivers, there were people, auto mechanics, there were Fortune 500 executives. And at the end of the session, I had a line of people wanting to speak to me. One person would say, well, how do I start an Amazon business? Or how do I import, goods from China to sell toys, to schools? And so, you try to take these, people respectfully, because there's 20 people that want, and, some people want the whole jot and tittle, right? And I remember, at that meeting, I actually met Craig from FreightWaves, the writer in New York.
The writer in New York, John Kingston or Greg Miller?
Greg Miller. What a terrific guy. He came up to me in the meeting and after the meeting and I thought, it was another executive that wanted to talk about, his insurance business. And he said he's FreightWaves. And, just that networking, resulted in, he and I working together on a couple of articles and, we maintained visibility on LinkedIn and, he's great to call on me and we have this relationship. And I just started thinking that, when you think about it geometrically, right, you get somebody, you put together a panel on LinkedIn and the subject is how to get comfortable with Zoom, how to get comfortable with the camera. I'm just kind of making this up, but that's a great topic, right? And then all of a sudden you have these 6 or 10 people that, you're talking to. And one says, hey, Steve, my former client was an importer of mattresses from China, 10,000 containers. Let me hook you up. It's like, you never know, right, where these are going to happen. So by doing kind of a panel and helping people get more comfortable, it also benefits you, right? So, I think it's a win-win opportunity that I'd like to see, someone like myself or yourself even kind of co-opt at some point.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing opportunity and it's an amazing way to do this. And when people come to me and ask me about entrepreneurship and creating a business, but they can't really find the right idea, I do have this advice: don't even worry about an idea. If you don't have an idea about exactly what you want to do, who cares? Go find the audience. Go find prospects. Go out to your target, build that network, build that following, and that's exactly what you're talking about. That's content marketing, right? You're going to host Zoom meetings. You're going to teach people. You are going to create and convey value. People remember that. People remember that, and that establishes credibility, and people will buy from you because of it.
Well, it's just amazing. I remember years ago when I was still at Sealand in Seattle, I created the first of its kind commission program where I believed in my heart of hearts that the best opportunities for hunting new business in ocean freight are in the interior, 40 states, not the Californias and the New Yorks, but I believe the best opportunities are in, Dayton, Ohio, or, Sioux City, Iowa, because clients in those areas don't have the kind of exposure or penetration to, say, the top, ocean or transportation people in Chicago or New York, not on a regular basis. So I taught a team that had no ocean experience. They came from the travel industry, insurance industry, and I taught them how to telemarket. And this is back in the early mid 90s. And Sealand allowed me to have kind of run of the house on the program. It was commission based. And these people ended up making more money than the traditional salespeople because, they had the right target, they had the right audience, they had the right training, they had the right script, not script, but, they were trained, in terms of how to look at this. And I think that, if you're a salesman, right, or a saleswoman, you're going to be intrinsically good at conveying a message. And I believe those parts are interchangeable. What's your thought?
Yeah, they are. They're definitely interchangeable. And was that a paid gig that you went out and did the sales training for?
No. What it was so Sealand kind of found out that I wanted to go out and start my own kind of consulting company. So they said, will you start it for us in-house? I never told this story publicly, but, it was a real, honor because I thought I was going to be fired because, I was working on this, 1,000-page business plan, and somehow Sealand found out about it. They said, hey, we're not mad. We just want you to implement that at our business. So actually, it got me kind of a leg up, because I got to run it for a Fortune 500 company, and it just made it, I said to myself, if I can do that, I can do anything, right? So no, but I'm just referring more to the fact that I think there's people out there in our network and that are watching us right now. I want to offer them, and I've got to figure out the right way. I mean, even through this video chat that we're doing now, we can have up to 10 people on a video chat. And it might be just a dynamic way to, help people as they start to plan going post-COVID. But I think, one thing that you could address, because I'll tell you, it still befuddles me every time that camera goes on. And I'm looking at it now, and it's like, I'm getting more comfortable with it. But what's your top 3 steps to get comfortable for a Zoom camera when the camera is on and the client wants to see you? What are your top 3 tips in how to be comfortable with the camera?
I do. Number 1 tip is just like anything in life: reps, practice, practice. There's no shortcut to that. I hadn't seen a camera a year and a half ago. I'd never really been on camera. I should have used video to sell carrier lists. And people were trying to convince me to do it, but I was camera shy. But the more times you're up in front of the camera, the better you are. So that's this definitely number 1. And number 2 is don't worry about your mistakes, especially at first. Don't think about it at all. We all say a lot. We all do this. You're not going to be you might not be the greatest speaker in the world, but you can be effective. Right? You can be effective, and all you have to do is close deals to be effective. So you don't have to be an anchor man. You don't have to be the best of the best. You're just effective.
You couldn't have said it better. I mean, I could stumble or stagger through a meeting, or I could be nervous that day, and it still might be perceived as a good session with the client, but I might feel not so great about it. But at the end of the day, if you deliver the goods and you get the contract, it really doesn't matter how you come across, as long as you're authentic, right? And humble. And I think one of the greatest things that I learned about broadcasting is just to be lighthearted about the mistakes I make. And I'm just a person that puts on a shoelace the same as Walter Cronkite would have, in his heyday. Right. And I think that, they just have the reps, they have the 10,000 hours. Right. Mm-hmm. But I think that the difference is, in your case, I mean, you're making a living at being a TV anchor. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
I know it's strange, especially if you asked me that 18 months to 2 years ago. I'd be like, I would think you're joking. There's no way this will ever happen. I don't mean, get away. And here I am, because of a lot of times because of circumstance, but and authenticity. That's really, I mean, that's my 3rd one. Work on your authenticity, and that will come with time. Because authenticity sells ideas, it sells money, it sells everything. If you're too polished, if you're worried about being too polished, again, I mean, it can turn a lot of people off. But authenticity will really never turn people off.
I love that. And as we start to narrow down for the time is going by so quickly, but I had 2 things that I'm just really endearing to ask you about. And I think they're important for our audience, because my kind of go-to, material things are, when I wear a suit, I love my lapel pin. But also my other go-to moment is, I always find that I like to give, a couple things as a takeaway that people can start thinking about. So because you're involved and engaged in so much activity throughout the Freight Waves dimension and all the modes that you cover, with all the guests that you have, what might be some signs in the industry in general that if you start to see them, it's going to kind of cause you to lose some sleep? And in other words, in looking at the next couple months, what 1 or 2 things that might happen might cause you to say, whoa, tell me about your fears.
My fears are where do I think the market's going, because it could be fearful for some people, but it's kind of exciting to me. I think I think we're going to see a replay of 2018. Unless the stimulus goes away and maybe we have a real major outbreak again and we have to shut down. But I don't really see that happening. But I think for shippers specifically, it's going to be a very rough time. For carriers and freight brokers, it's going to be really good. For freight brokers, it's going to be a very tight capacity. Rates are going to go up. My phone's been blowing up over the last week from freight brokers looking to source carriers, looking to find different ways to cover loads for their customers. So I think it's fearful for some people. For me, I'm kind of excited about it because it's a kind of a bull market for carrierless. It's a bull market for freight waves, and I think it'll be good. But over the next couple weeks or next couple months, it's all has to do with health, and that's been my philosophy since March. This is a health problem, and once people feel safe enough to go about their daily business again, we'll return to normal, and not before that.
I think that's a wishful and very provocative way to forward think. I think, and we've been talking, by the way, to Kevin Hill of FreightWaves, and I'm Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean Audit. Kevin, as we kind of wrap up, one of the things that I also wanted to do is you think about your week over the last couple of days. You wake up today and you reframe the news that you see in general, and you look at your workload ahead. So what's one thing that you're thinking today that you might not have been thinking about yesterday, and how could you help the audience position or maybe ratchet onto that thought? Anything come to your mind in terms of something that you woke up today and you looked at the news, or you studied a situation and you said, this is something I think people should really know about? Anything off the top of your head?
Nothing really off the top of my head, but besides where the freight market's going. And I think we're seeing that with ocean rates as well.
Right.
We're seeing a surge come in that I kind of, it's been building all week, my realization of this. Mm-hmm. And I'd seen it for a couple of weeks, but I think we hit the inflection point, right? So we've been seeing this bull market in rates, ocean volumes, freight volumes, but I think we finally hit that inflection point. I think we've hit the reflection point to where people are, shippers are scurrying around, maybe in a slight panic, and where everyone's gearing up now to hit these freight volumes, because I think everyone in the market sees this is going to be a long-term situation now.
Hey, I love that. I love how you think. I have one last thought or idea, you being the expert you are, and especially in the freight brokerage side. Can I run it by you real quick?
Yeah, definitely.
So I have this concept for, I think, ways to develop new channels of revenue and multiple sources of revenue stream for people that maybe are on your side of the industry, on the carrierless side, on the freight brokerage side. Because, one of the things that I found, Kevin, is that a lot of the clients that, freight brokers have, they're also clients that ship ocean. So if a freight broker in Chicago is working with a chemical company transporting loads from Chicago to Dallas, that chemical company may also have a couple thousand containers of ocean freight. And one of the things that I'm thinking about geometrically, because I'm always looking to find ways to enhance the value in the market that I have, as well as what clients need, as well as freight brokers, is what if there was a strategy where a freight broker wanted to have a certain client. They knew that client had ocean. They had no revenue yet on the trucking side. And the freight broker goes to the client and says, hey, why don't we do a retroactive audit of your ocean freight? We'll let you keep, 80% of the recovery, as long as you use, 20% of the recovery from the ocean freight on our domestic services, on our freight brokerage services. What do you think of an idea like that?
I think that has some legs. I think it does, because you're adding value on something that's something that's not in your core, but it's a good lead in and hook to offer complementary services. So I would, if I was a freight broker, my ears would perk up with that.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways to do it, but I mean, and it's just not Ocean, right? It could be small parcel consulting. It could be other modes as well. I'm trying to keep this neutral here, but I think the point is that I think more and more salespeople and more executives and owners within the freight brokerage industry of their various brokerages, I think sometimes, and I don't mean this, no offense to this, that they get kind of in their little box about where they're what lane they're in, right? But I think that sometimes when you break out of that box and you see some different scenarios and different complementary services, it could also help you and develop a first mover strategy that you might not have considered before. So I thought your take on it was interesting. There's nobody better that does what this man does. I've had the chance to interview today Kevin Hill, FreightWaves and Carrierless. Kevin's probably, I don't know, one of the top 10 experts in the United States on this topic. And Kevin, as we finish our talk today, I can't thank you enough for spending time with me. And I hope you'll come back and we could consider maybe a couple pilots on coaching and developing some of the great folks out there that would like to take advantage of the ideas that we talked about today. What do you say?
I think that's a very interesting thing, and I'm in it. And thank you. It's always a pleasure being. But yeah, let's discuss this more offline.
Yeah, I think there's some great legs to helping the community, and that's all part of what we do. And I think with your the great messages that you're bringing across and FreightWaves and what you've done as an entrepreneur, when two of us like that, team up and develop at least the exposure to what folks might want to take a look at. Information is power. And I think that's one of the beauties of what we do as broadcasters and as solopreneurs. So Kevin, let me say well wishes to you and your family for the weekend. And it's been a pleasure having Kevin Hill on OK Boomer Live. Kevin, thank you again.
Thank you, Steve.
And I'm Steve Ferreira signing off for now. And please leave your questions or comments for me for Kevin on the LinkedIn chat. And I'll make sure that both Kevin and I see them. And we wish you all a great weekend. We love you all and take care and have a great day. Cheers.